Good morning, afternoon, everyone. Let's talk about something we've all felt before, that sting when someone you care about ignores you. Maybe it's a friend who stopped calling, a colleague who's not returning your energy, or someone you love who doesn't see your worth. It hurts, but here's the truth: when they ignore you, don't chase them. Why? Because your value does not depend on whether someone else recognizes it. The moment you tie your worth to someone else's attention or affection, you hand them the keys to your self-esteem. And that is far too precious to give away. Let's talk about boundaries. If someone is ignoring you, it might be a sign they've drawn an invisible line in the sand. When we chase, we not only disregard their boundary, but we also violate our own. Boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're the bridges that help us maintain our dignity and emotional health. Reciprocity is a fundamental principle that governs human relationships, rooted deeply in psychology and sociology. At its essence, reciprocity is the mutual exchange of effort, care, and attention that creates balance and harmony between people. It's the invisible thread that connects us, ensuring that relationships remain equitable and fulfilling. Without it, relationships, whether personal or professional, become lopsided, draining, and ultimately unsustainable. The science of reciprocity begins with our innate human tendency to respond in kind. Studies in social psychology reveal that when someone does something kind or generous for us, we're instinctively motivated to reciprocate. This response is not just cultural, it's evolutionary. It helped our ancestors build cooperative societies where mutual support ensured survival. From sharing resources to protecting one another, reciprocity became a cornerstone of human interaction, fostering trust and collaboration. In modern relationships, reciprocity goes beyond tangible exchanges like favors or gifts. It includes emotional and psychological investments, the effort to listen, the willingness to support, and the readiness to support, and the readiness to show up when needed. Healthy relationships are built on this give and take dynamic, where both parties contribute and benefit in roughly equal measure. But what happens when reciprocity is absent? Imagine a scale with one side carrying all the weight while the other remains empty. Over time, the imbalance creates strain. The person who's constantly giving may begin to feel unappreciated, exhausted, or even resentful. On the other side, the person who consistently receives without contributing may come to take the relationship for granted, seeing the giver's effort as an expectation rather than a gift. Interestingly, research shows that one-sided relationships where reciprocity is lacking can have measurable effects on mental and emotional well-being. People who give without receiving often experience higher levels of stress, lower self-esteem, and even burnout. The brain, wired for fairness, struggles to reconcile the imbalance, leading to feelings of inadequacy or frustration. It's important to recognize that reciprocity doesn't mean keeping a ledger or expecting exact equality in every exchange. Relationships aren't transactions, and trying to quantify every interaction can erode trust. Instead, reciprocity is about the overall balance over time. It's the assurance that both people are willing to invest in the relationship, even if their contributions look different. For example, one person might be better at offering emotional support while the other excels at practical problem solving. What matters is the mutual willingness to show up for each other in meaningful ways. There's also a psychological component to how we perceive reciprocity. People are more likely to give freely when they believe their efforts are valued and reciprocated, even if not immediately. Conversely, when someone feels their contributions are ignored or taken for granted, their motivation to invest in the relationship diminishes. This creates a cycle. Lack of reciprocity leads to disengagement, which further erodes the connection. In romantic relationships, the absence of reciprocity often manifests as one partner feeling like they're carrying the load. This can mean being the only one initiating plans, addressing conflicts, or providing emotional labor. Over time, this dynamic can breed resentment, even if the other partner isn't intentionally neglectful. The same principle applies to friendships, family relationships, and professional settings. The beauty of reciprocity lies in its ability to strengthen bonds. When someone sees their effort mirrored in kind, it reinforces trust and deepens connection. It's a reminder that their presence and contributions matter. This mutual exchange creates a positive feedback loop where both parties feel motivated to continue investing in the relationship. However, it's crucial to acknowledge that reciprocity doesn't always come naturally. Cultural norms, personal upbringing, and individual insecurities can all influence how people approach relationships. For example, someone raised in an environment where their needs were dismissed might struggle to recognize the importance of giving back. Alternatively, people pleasers might overgive, fearing that setting boundaries will make them less likable. Recognizing the importance of reciprocity means being intentional about both giving and receiving. For those who tend to give too much, it's about learning to step back and allow others to contribute. For those who lean more toward receiving, it's about cultivating awareness and making an effort to match the energy and care they're shown. At its heart, the science of reciprocity is a testament to our interconnectedness. It reminds us that relationships thrive not because of grand gestures, but because of the small, consistent acts of care and attention that build trust and mutual respect over time. The balance of give and take is not just a psychological necessity, it's the key to lasting, meaningful connections. Vulnerability is often misunderstood. In a world that celebrates control, independence, and resilience, vulnerability can feel like a weakness, a flaw, or even a liability. We're taught to guard our emotions, to hide our insecurities, and to project an image of unshakable confidence. Yet the truth is that vulnerability is not a weakness, it's one of the most profound expressions of strength we possess. At its core, vulnerability is the willingness to show up as you are, without guarantees of acceptance or success. It's the courage to say, this is me, these are my fears, my hopes, my scars, and my dreams. Vulnerability requires immense bravery because it exposes us to the possibility of rejection, judgment, or failure. But it's also the very thing that makes authentic connection possible. The science of vulnerability is rooted in human emotion and connection. Psychologists and researchers have long studied its role in relationships, mental health, and personal growth. One of the most striking findings is that vulnerability is the gateway to intimacy. When we share our true selves, our struggles, doubts, and imperfections, we invite others to do the same. This mutual openness creates trust, empathy, and deeper bonds. Ironically, while we often admire vulnerability in others, we fear it in ourselves. Think about a time when someone shared something deeply personal with you. Perhaps they confided in you about a failure, a fear, or a moment of uncertainty. Did you see them as weak? Likely not. Instead, you probably felt honored by their trust and moved by their authenticity. Yet when it comes to our own vulnerability, we hesitate. We worry that revealing too much will make us seem inadequate or unworthy. This fear of vulnerability is rooted in a fundamental misconception that being open makes us powerless. In reality, vulnerability is the ultimate act of empowerment. It's a declaration that we are no longer willing to let fear dictate our lives. By embracing vulnerability, we take control of our narrative. We acknowledge our imperfections not as failures, but as essential parts of our humanity. And vulnerability is also deeply tied to creativity and innovation. The act of creating, whether it's art, writing, a new idea, or even a solution to a problem, requires putting yourself out there. It means risking criticism, failure, or misunderstanding. Yet every groundbreaking discovery, every masterpiece, and every transformative idea has emerged because someone was brave enough to be vulnerable. In relationships, vulnerability is the glue that holds us together. Without it, we risk living on the surface, engaging in interactions that are polite but hollow. Vulnerability invites depth. It's the moment when you tell a friend about your struggles instead of pretending everything is fine. It's the courage to admit when you've made a mistake or to ask for help when you need it. These moments of openness create connections that are real and lasting. But vulnerability isn't just about emotional exposure, it's also about resilience. To be vulnerable is to accept uncertainty and risk, knowing that the outcome may not go your way. It's standing in the face of fear and showing up anyway. This resilience doesn't mean you won't feel hurt or disappointment. It means you have the strength to face those feelings and continue moving forward. What makes vulnerability especially powerful is its transformative potential. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we grow. Every time you take a risk, whether it's sharing your feelings, pursuing a dream, or stepping out of your comfort zone, you expand your capacity for courage and authenticity. Vulnerability teaches us that failure is not the end, it's a stepping stone to learning and self-discovery. Yet vulnerability doesn't mean throwing caution to the wind or sharing indiscriminately. It's about discernment, knowing when and with whom to open up. Being vulnerable requires trust, both in yourself and in the people you choose to share with. It's not about seeking validation, but about honoring your truth. One of the most significant challenges of vulnerability is navigating the fear of rejection. Opening up doesn't guarantee that others will respond with kindness or understanding. Sometimes our vulnerability may be met with indifference or even criticism. But even in those moments, vulnerability is not wasted. It's a testament to your courage and authenticity. It's a reminder that your worth isn't determined by someone else's reaction, but by your willingness to live honestly. In the end, vulnerability is the antidote to perfectionism, shame, and isolation. It's the bridge that connects us to others and to ourselves. It's the acknowledgement that life is messy, uncertain, and often unpredictable, and that's okay. To be vulnerable is to embrace the fullness of life with all its highs and lows, and to stand firmly in the truth of who you are. Energy is one of the most valuable and finite resources we have. It shapes how we move through the world, how we engage with others, and how we pursue our goals. Yet too often we spend it without intention on people, situations, or habits that drain us rather than replenish us. Focusing on your energy is not just about self-care, it's about recognizing the power of your attention and directing it in ways that align with your values and well-being. Energy is multifaceted, encompassing physical, emotional, and mental reserves. It's easy to overlook how interconnected these aspects are. A sleepless night can leave you emotionally irritable and mentally sluggish. Similarly, an emotionally taxing encounter can weigh on your physical vitality. Understanding this interconnectedness is the first step in learning to protect and prioritize your energy. One of the most common ways we misuse energy is by giving it away to people or situations that do not serve us. Whether it's overextending ourselves to please others, engaging in unproductive arguments, or dwelling on past mistakes, we often leak energy in ways that leave us feeling depleted. It's not selfish to conserve your energy, it's necessary. Without it, you can't show up fully for yourself or others. Focusing on your energy also requires an honest inventory of your life. What fuels you? What drains you? These questions may seem simple, but their answers often reveal uncomfortable truths. Perhaps a friendship you've held onto for years no longer feels reciprocal. Maybe a job you once loved has become a source of stress and discontent. Or perhaps the habits you've developed scrolling through social media late into the night or saying yes to every request are slowly chipping away your energy reserves. Recognizing these patterns isn't about blame, it's about awareness. Once you identify what drains you, you can begin to make changes. Setting boundaries, both with others and yourself, is a crucial part of this process. It might mean limiting your time with people who consistently take more than they give, saying no to commitments that don't align with your priorities, or creating routines that nurture rather than deplete you. Redirecting your energy also involves being mindful of where you place your attention. Energy follows focus. When you fixate on negative thoughts, past regrets, or fears about the future, you feed them with your energy. This doesn't mean ignoring challenges or difficult emotions. It means approaching them with intention rather than letting them consume you. Mindfulness practices like meditation or journaling can help you cultivate this intentionality by grounding you in the present moment. Another key aspect of focusing on your energy is understanding its cyclical nature. Energy isn't a constant, it ebbs and flows throughout the day, the week, and even the seasons of life. Trying to maintain a high level of productivity or emotional engagement at all times is not only unrealistic, but also unsustainable. And learning to honor your natural rhythms, whether that means taking a break when you're tired or giving yourself grace during periods of low motivation, is an essential part of energy management. Focusing on your energy also means recognizing the importance of replenishment. Just as a car can't run on an empty tank, you can't pour from an empty cup. Replenishment looks different for everyone. For some, it's spending time in nature. For others, it's connecting with loved ones, pursuing creative hobbies, or simply enjoying solitude. The key is to identify what nourishes you and to prioritize those activities without guilt. In relationships, focusing on your energy often means evaluating whether the dynamics are balanced. Healthy relationships should be energizing, even when they require effort. If you consistently feel drained after interacting with someone, it's worth examining whether the relationship is aligned with your values and needs. This doesn't mean cutting people off at the first sign of conflict or difficulty, but it does mean being honest about how your energy is affected and taking steps to protect it when necessary. It's also worth noting that focusing on your energy doesn't mean avoiding challenges or hard work. Growth often requires discomfort, and meaningful endeavors, whether building a career, nurturing a relationship, or pursuing a personal goal, will demand energy. The difference is that these investments should feel purposeful and aligned with your values rather than leaving you depleted and questioning your worth. Ultimately, focusing on your energy is an act of self-respect. It's a declaration that your time, your emotions, and your mental clarity are valuable. By being intentional about where you direct your energy and how you replenish it, you create a life that feels more balanced, more fulfilling, and more authentically aligned with who you are. Acceptance is one of the most freeing and transformative acts we can offer ourselves. At its heart, acceptance is about acknowledging reality as it is, not as we wish it to be, not as we fear it might be, but simply as it exists in this moment. It is the quiet but powerful decision to stop fighting against the tides of life and to allow things to be what they are. This does not mean resignation or complacency. Rather, it means releasing the resistance that keeps us stuck in frustration, denial, or despair. True acceptance begins with self-awareness. It requires us to confront our own thoughts, emotions, and circumstances without judgment. This can be incredibly difficult because so much of our lives are spent striving for change or improvement. We often believe that accepting something means giving up or admitting defeat, but this is a misconception. Acceptance is not about surrendering your power, it's about reclaiming it. By accepting what is, you free yourself from the emotional and mental energy spent resisting or denying reality, creating space for clarity and intention. One of the most challenging aspects of acceptance is learning to embrace imperfection, both in ourselves and in others. As humans, we are wired to seek control and order, and this often translates into unrealistic expectations of flawless relationships, perfect outcomes, and unshakable confidence. When life falls short of these ideals, as it inevitably does, the gap between reality and our expectations becomes a source of suffering. Acceptance bridges this gap, allowing us to see the beauty in imperfection and to find peace in the present moment. Acceptance is also deeply tied to forgiveness, particularly self-forgiveness. Many of us carry the weight of our past mistakes, replaying them in our minds and wishing we could rewrite history. But holding on to this regret only anchors us to the past, preventing us from moving forward. Acceptance invites us to acknowledge our humanity, that we are flawed, that we have made mistakes, and that these mistakes do not define us. It's an invitation to extend the same compassion to ourselves that we would offer to a dear friend. In relationships, acceptance plays a vital role in fostering understanding and connection. Too often, we fall into the trap of trying to change the people we care about, believing that our version of who they should be is better than their own. This creates tension and resentment, eroding trust and intimacy. Acceptance, on the other hand, allows us to see others as they truly are, with all their complexities, strengths, and vulnerabilities. It doesn't mean condoning harmful behavior, but it does mean letting go of the need to control or fix someone else. Perhaps one of the most profound aspects of acceptance is its ability to soften the grip of fear. Fear often arises from uncertainty about the future, about our worth, or about the outcomes of our choices. When we resist reality, we amplify this fear, creating a cycle of anxiety and avoidance. Acceptance breaks this cycle by grounding us in the present moment. It reminds us that while we may not have control over everything, we do have the power to choose our response. Acceptance is not a one-time act, but a practice, a commitment to returning to the present, to observing without judgment, and to letting go of the need for everything to be different. This practice requires patience and gentleness, especially in moments of pain or disappointment. It's not about forcing yourself to be okay with things you wish were different. It's about acknowledging those feelings and allowing them to exist without resistance. This liberation doesn't mean that we stop striving for growth or improvement. It simply means that our efforts come from a place of clarity and peace rather than frustration or denial. Acceptance creates a foundation upon which change can happen, not because we are rejecting the present, but because we are embracing it fully and using it as a starting point for what comes next.